Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back after lunch, and we'll try and keep you awake for the next hour and a half. So thank you all for coming. So the session this afternoon is entitled Strengthening Partnerships Across Government, Academia, Industry and Philanthropy. We've got a really excellent panel to debate this topic, and I think we'll all start from the premise that it's a good thing in principle to achieve partnerships. The question is how. So let me introduce the panel. So first, Carmencita Padilla, who's a national scientist at the National Academy of Science and Technology, an emeritus professor at the College of Medicine at the University of the Philippines. Next to her is Ephraim Kayembe, who was formerly Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and a Member of Parliament in Malawi. Then we've got Helen Einma, who we just heard before lunch, who is from the Estonian Young Academy of Sciences, and the Young Academy's Science Advice Structure, and I'm about to be damaged, who is also involved in science advice for policy by European academies. Next to her is Joachim von Braun, who is president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences in the Vatican City. Then Lukovi Seki, who's the lead in the African Science, Technology and Innovation Indicators Program, the office of the CEO of the African Union Development Agency. Sorry, he's going to be online. And then next to Joachim is Ahmed Al-Sharif, who's founding partner and CEO of Avero's Venture in Egypt. And finally, and definitely not least, we have Peggy Hamburg, who is the co-president of the IAP, who will have the last word in this session. So with no more ado, we're going to have presentations of 6 minutes, and I'm going to sort of for up to 6 minutes, and at 30 seconds after that, I'm going to amputate the speaker, not literally, but stop them. That should give us lots of time for discussion. So I'm going to maybe ask a question or two afterwards, but really it's for you. So I want to encourage you to think about questions, comments right at the beginning, so that we can have a good discussion, because I think these sessions are best if they're fully interactive. So engage your most critical senses in working out what are the key issues for you. So with no more ado, I'm going to start by asking Carmencita to give the first talk.
Hello. Okay. All right. Thank you. I've been asked to give the angle of the academia. And so before I go to the question that has been posed to me, let me give you a small background so that you understand where I'm coming from. I'm a pediatrician, a geneticist. I've been doing research for 3 decades. And my research has led to 2 national laws that are now being implemented by government. And then in the last 9 years of prior to retirement, I was an administrator. I was the chancellor, the president of a university. So I sort of like went through across the system, from a young researcher to eventually to one who's actually awarding the grants. So the question posed to us actually is a very long question. So I'd like to unpack them. And before going to the question of what is the enabler for a resilient science ecosystem, I'd like to look at the components of a science ecosystem from the perspective of what I have been through. So number one will be, we've heard some of this already. We've got the researchers, the inventors, the innovators, the collaborators. That's one. The second will be the research institutions. That's the universities, the centers. Number 3 will be industry. Number 4, regulators. Number 5 will be the science communicators. Number 6 will be policymakers, and 7 will be the general public. And from my experience from when I was a young researcher, I had to go through all of this to be able to achieve the goal of making science have impact to society. So the question posed to me was actually, what is the key factor that enables the development of a resilient science ecosystem? Now, I'd like to look at the ones that I mentioned as part of a hub and spoke model. Each one is actually a spoke. I don't have a center because depending on who I'm talking to, the center may be different. In some occasions, it's actually the researcher. In some occasions, it's industry. In some occasions, it's the policymaker. But the question now is, what actually enables now that this ecosystem will become resilient. And from my experience, and I can still see it happening right now, there are many factors, but I had to single out one, and it is still something that's intangible, and it is the mindset of interdisciplinary collaboration. We heard it actually the past 2 days, and that is actually for real. Without the spirit of being interdisciplinary, you can't actually succeed. In other words, as a researcher, I have to deal with the university, the bureaucracy of the university, the industry. If there is a product that needs to be expanded, I need actually industry to scale it up. I have to talk to my policymakers. The science communicators is actually very crucial because scientists usually do not actually know how to express the value of their work so that it can be implemented on a bigger scale. I put the general public at the end to show that despite the fact that I put the general public at the very end, it actually has an equal role in my hub and spoke. It's just that in academia now, the question now is who will make sure that this interdisciplinary collaboration is going to happen? It's actually the leadership at the academia. Why? Because when you're the leader of the university or academia, you have the capacity to take risk. We heard that. You can put money into certain things. You can decide you can decide on things that ordinarily will be unsafe for other decision makers. So the leadership is very crucial because they will put it together, make sure that the researchers are happy, the grants management, they have people take care of the patents, the publications, and so on. So all of this ecosystem will happen if the leadership has the right approach towards science. Now, the next question given to us is, what will hinder the development of the ecosystem? For me, as a young researcher, I'd go back, I'd say bureaucracy. And even if I'm now at this age, I still think that bureaucracy becomes a hindrance to a lot of development. So our role right now in academia is to make sure that we break the barriers so that we can actually push forward work, innovations, and all the research we've been talking about. But at the end of the day, bureaucracy is only one part of the game. I just want to end with one thing because in the past 2 days, I've been hearing about new ideas and bad ideas. But honestly, for me, no idea is a crazy idea. I don't look at funding as a problem. If you've got a good idea, you will be able to get the money. So let me end now with a joke because we've been talking about ChatGPT and AI this morning, and I actually put in the question into ChatGPT, and you know what it said? What will enable funding? In other words, ChatGPT is wrong because the ecosystem needs all of the elements that I have mentioned. So thank you.
Thank you. That was perfectly disciplined and extremely interesting. So that was 5 minutes, 53 seconds. Brilliant. You've set the standard. Ephraim.
Thank you very much. I thought before I zero in on the question given to us, I should introduce myself. I'm Ephraim Kaembe, a politician from Malawi. So whatever I do is from the perspective of legislation, providing oversight and representation. From that perspective, most of the time, in terms of the nature of our work, we do appropriation of resources to various sectors. When we are doing that, there is a sort of engagement with technical institutions that would want certain things to be done in a different way. But where the challenge comes in is when parliamentarians look at particular requests or engagements as if they are not grounded in evidence. For example, do we have evidence that the resources that were channeled towards scientific research is actually translating to positive outcomes? If we had research findings, did those particular research findings translate into policy development? If we see that there is evidence in terms of alignment with society needs, then at parliamentary level, there is no resistance to provide more resources towards the academia. But where you have research 2, 3, 4 consecutive years, but the findings are not necessarily translating into policy development or an improvement in a piece of legislation, then it becomes a little bit challenging for parliamentarians to accept maybe an increase in a certain allocation of resources. So a question of alignment of research objectives with the challenges communities are facing becomes very, very vital. Now, how do we strengthen the partnership itself? There should be continuous engagement between the academia, the private sector, as well as the legislative body, because by the end of the day, we expect that the parliamentarians would provide oversight on what we want. We can provide oversight on policy recommendations, whether a particular ministry or department really operationalized particular policy recommendation that came out of the research that were jointly executed by researchers and scholars within various institutions of higher learning. If there is that sort of alignment, then the collaboration is more likely to sustain itself because there is a win-win situation. But there is also one challenge that keeps coming out: the relationship between older academies and the new reformed academies. Have we designed a proper collaborative mechanism so that we are providing technical support to the young academies so that they are growing as we are also harvesting the growth path within the framework of collaboration itself? Or we are leaving the young academies to operate on their own so that maybe they are isolated from the mainstream academies who are focused on research, because there should be sharing of knowledge, sharing of ideas to sustain the whole science ecosystem. So that's what I wanted to put forward to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. That was terrific. Helen.
Thank you. And I'm very happy that you brought up the topic of young academies, because this is my role, I think, here on this stage to speak to the question that we have been posed from the perspective of young academies. The question is, what is one key factor that enables or hinders the development of a truly resilient and collaborative science ecosystem across sectors? And so from the perspective of young academies, there's one point that I want to make, and I want to make it through a story. I come from a background in philosophy as well as law, but the story that I'm telling is from a supervisor that I had in philosophy. When she was doing her PhD in Germany, she was doing it along with a good friend of hers that was a doctoral student in philosophy, specializing in philosophy of science. And that woman came from a family of pharmacists. The family, both of the parents were pharmacists, as well as one of the daughters was a pharmacist, and then the other daughter was specialized in philosophy. The parents supported both of their daughters, gave them some pocket money for the time of their studies, but they gave the daughters studying pharmacy twice as much as to the daughters studying philosophy. And well, it wasn't an easy situation for the one who was studying philosophy, of course. Then one day, the parents received a visit from the supervisor of the students studying philosophy, as a well-known professor of philosophy, and he talked to the parents about the importance of the big picture that philosophy allows to develop, the importance of also studying science with a means of philosophy and the conceptual frameworks, the meaning-making that philosophy allows to create. And so after this visit and after having a conversation with that professor, the other daughter studying philosophy started receiving just as much pocket money as the daughter studying pharmacy. And so, of course, what the point here is that sometimes we need other people to come and explain the importance of science. And we need people to explain the importance of science to those who are not involved in it, to understand how science can be useful. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But for young scholars, what's really important is that there are those who take care of the path that we are on, so who try to help us or support us on the path. So the mentorship is important, but also this kind of sponsoring and advocacy that senior scholars can do for the young scholars, because I think it's really important for young scholars in the development of their career paths. So there is a responsibility that I think from the perspective of young scholars, I would gladly put on senior scholars to help us build this kind of collaborative environment. Thank you.
Thank you. That's brilliant.
Well, good afternoon. Let me give you a couple of examples illuminating the challenges when we want to build science ecosystems and strengthening partnerships. Examples of the last year of initiatives in the Vatican's Academy of Science. The first example relates to an initiative in climate resilience. The process which we have kicked off there with 7 meetings in the Vatican and in various hemispheres in the world included not only scientists, but local government, mayors and governors, youth organizations, faith-based organizations, and business. Why local government? Because of the frustration with central governments and the slow process of the COP30, since we have now 30 COPs. Mobilizing local government, when we talk about government and science relationships, we don't relate intensively and frequently enough to local government, is my first point. A second example relates to an initiative in the field of health policy, doing a major research series of conferences on cancer research, healthcare, and prevention. And that's where we, of course, have to have very different partners in the policy domains, health policymakers, the EU Commissioner on Health on the one hand, and the United States health policy leaders from India and from South Africa. So it's a very different ecosystem which we are challenged to relate to. We did this initiative because there are simultaneously unrelated billions of euros or dollars programs launched in Europe and the US, the Moonshot program here and large challenges there. So in that case, we worked with the European cancer science academies. Again, a very diverse ecosystem. Other examples relate how we deal with AI and robotics. There you have to have the regulators and the innovators at the table, or an initiative to bring indigenous knowledge together with science. We had a major conference on that. Again, a completely different ecosystems. So my message is we have to be very flexible in the science community, addressing the ecosystems of science and of policy connections. Lastly, let me emphasize that strengthening policy relationships, well, not always. We are well advised to weaken policy relationships in cases when we are up to what the previous session has addressed, mainly undermining the freedom of science and respect for science-based truth. So we have to be prepared in science diplomacy to also be undiplomatic. Our academy from the Vatican issued a statement on freedom of science in June of this year, which was picked up in Nature, and it got a major rebuff from the Trump administration. So we have to be willing to face up to the threats. I want to refer back to Mohammed Hassan's suggestion. We have to come together, building some sort of platforms on which we can exercise togetherness in strengthening the voice of science, the freedom of science, and build ecosystems that produce. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And that's a very good message for an IAP meeting. So let me now turn online to Lukovi, who I hope has been able to hear everything so far. Over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. I don't know if you can get me 100%. Much appreciated. Yep. I'm going to speak to you from the African Union perspective. I'm coming from the Science, Technology, Innovation portfolio, the African Union Development Agency, the development wing of the African Union. So far, when it comes to securing a science, technology, and innovation ecosystem, being resilient, and also strengthening partnership, number one, as a continent, we have a vision. Our vision by 2063 is to have the Africa we want, and each cluster should contribute toward the achievement of some of the goals. While we are having a continental vision, at the same time, countries are also having their own national vision. And they are mainly, those visions at the country level are mainly translated into national development plans with priorities. Some of the priorities are mainly related to science, technology, and innovation. And at the same time, we also have policies in charge of focusing mainly on science and technology on the one hand, and on the other hand, we can also have a policy on innovation. But in general, we observe the combination of science, technology, and innovation in a single framework instrument. And some of the time, we can only see a few paragraphs related to innovation. Now, when it comes to the collaboration, because I'm coming from the angle where we measure science, technology, and innovation, because you cannot manage what you are not able to measure. We are having researchers, technicians, and other support staff to be able to perform science accordingly and technology. And on the other hand, we also have the output component of what we call innovation. And for us, at least to make sure that we secure that relationship among those four traditional actors, showing kind of quadruple helix model without ignoring the rest of the world also contributing to science, technology, innovation or research and innovation. We just need to make sure that we implement the national innovation system. The reason beyond that, because we are no longer part of the first industrial revolution. We are navigating between the fourth and fifth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution is where we are allowing a machine to interact. But at the end of the day, with the fifth industrial revolution, we have the interconnection between human and machines. So when it comes now to this way of implementing this synergy, beyond even Africa, we have Sustainable Development Goal number 17. That is a goal of goal when it comes to partnership. But on top of that, we also have Sustainable Development Goal number 9. At least we have industrialization, innovation, and infrastructure. So on top of that, we also have SDG number 4, where we have quality education. So we cannot at least implement most of those priorities we have in Africa when it comes to science, technology, and innovation without having all those four sectors. And we cannot also ignore the society, including the ecosystem, the environment. So when we talk in terms of industry, we are flagging mainly business enterprises, either being state-owned or firms that belong to household. And when it comes to academia, we focus mainly on the tertiary education sector, in connection with the measurement using the international guideline known as Frascati manual when we are measuring R&D, or Oslo manual when we are measuring innovation. And to conclude, I just need to flag that the involvement of all those stakeholders is very crucial, because for the current iteration from 2025 to 2034, we are focusing mainly on 5 main sectors, because we cannot be sitting in the venue, even myself, if we are not healthier. So health is very important. So at least we need to have all those actors. Number 2, we cannot be sitting in this meeting without being fit. We need food and nutrition security. Number 3, we cannot be in this meeting without ICT. Even though we have ICT, assume we don't have energy. That is number 4. So those are a key sector that we have to consider throughout this relationship. And then finally, we have the aspect of environment. So all those aspects to implement, we need at least to make sure that we involve all those sectors we have in the economy to accelerate our industrialization, to fit in the 5th industrial revolution, to allow other countries, because in Africa we have mainly the least developed country representing 70% of the entire world. That is not good. And then we are willing to transit from low-income country to middle-income country by 2034. So those aspects are reflecting when it comes to the implementation of the science, technology, innovation strategy for Africa's TISA 2034 are very important. In addition to that, even the way we are collaborating with the European Union in implementing the AUE innovation agenda, putting together the 55 countries we have in Africa and the 27 countries in the European Union, having 82. So they have to show that we can never implement innovation accordingly, cognizant that research is already embedded as an innovation activity, without involving all those 4 sectors. And as I said, we cannot just limit ourselves to the quadruple helix model. We have to go beyond even the quintuple model. And beyond that, we still need to focus on what we call the national innovation system. That's what I can say for the first component. But now, what is affecting the implementation of this synergy?
30 seconds, I'm afraid. 30 seconds.
Thank you. What is affecting us to implement accordingly the synergy is the low commitment in investing in research, because even Sustainable Development Goal number 9.5 require that each country should increase its spending in R&D and increase the number of researchers per 100,000 inhabitants. So those are the aspects I would like to reflect when it comes to those questions raised. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Ahmed, a view from industry.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, let's put some context to the perspective. My name is Ahmed Al-Sharif. I'm the founding partner and CEO of Avaros Ventures. Avaros Ventures is a VC firm building Circulate MENA platform. The platform consists of 3 main pillars. First is a think tank, and we have Circularity Labs, which is an acceleration incubation program. And we also have a fund that invests in circular innovation and the intersection of advanced manufacturing, agri-tech, and energy across the MENA region. Before I started my venture capital journey, I come from a family business background that is highly rooted into the industrial sector in Egypt. So I'm trying to give the different perspective, the industry perspective, and perhaps some honesty here that might not be very well aligned with everyone here in the room. But to answer the building resilient and collaborative science ecosystems, what are the hurdles? What are the things that should be done? I think above all, there is no market-driven innovation in our region. Or it's minimal. There is no alignment. Perhaps when we put a geographical focus about the innovation ecosystems, we need to look at a very different element. We need to see first what are the different aspects that are in Africa compared to perhaps in Europe and the West. What's happening in Egypt is not what is happening in the UK. So the geographical lens is extremely important here. So lack of alignment leading to lack of collaboration is something that should be really highlighted. So the incentives for industry to cooperate with academia is minimal. Perhaps some countries are trying to act on that a little bit, and they're trying to push for that, to put some maybe tax incentives or something like that for industry to cooperate with academia, but it is minimal in the least developing countries. Things are changing, of course, and in Egypt specifically, things are changing. We have the alliance and development programs that are already taking place, and perhaps this will change a bit. But again, it's totally different. So I would like to highlight this point above everything else. And the other thing is the lack of quality. Lack of quality when it comes to innovation. Of course, I don't have the sheer audacity to compare the spending on innovation between perhaps Egypt and the UK. It's impossible. So the lack of quality and the lack of trust in the quality of innovation that comes from many developing countries is not up to the standard of industry. So this is why they resort perhaps to other academic institutions or to other means of collaboration. Perhaps the translational institutions may play a role here. So I highly recommend that in countries that don't have a very well developed ecosystem for innovation, perhaps they can rely more in innovation hubs, on venture capitalists, on venture building, venture catalysts, where they can play the catalytic role, or perhaps play the role between translating the language of academia, or give some perspective on market-driven demand for innovation. So maybe people will utilize their very limited resources in the most efficient manner. And I think maybe also we can explore things like innovation superclusters. I'm sure that there is a heated debate about that and how efficient is that, but maybe in countries that are lacking the official institutional development, maybe innovation superclusters and the private sector and the universities and the businesses can play a role and can catalyze that with some sort of DFI and capital enhancement. So lack of capital is definitely on the table in a few geographies, and we can't say that lack of capital is not there. And perhaps the well-endowed universities and the well-endowed ecosystems of innovation does not feel the pain of this, but I think maybe sorts of innovation hub and innovation superclusters can fill such a gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, over to Peggy, Philanthropy.
Well, thank you very much. And I am representing.
It's working now.
Okay. I am going to speak from the perspective of philanthropy, although most of my career, I have to admit, has been in government. But having served in foundations and on the board of foundations, I think it is an important perspective. It is clear that we live in a complex and ever-changing world where no one sector is going to be able to provide the scientific knowledge and the actions needed to address the global problems before us. We need a resilient and collaborative science ecosystem, but it is very hard to really think about how do we achieve and sustain that. Philanthropy, I think, does have a very critical role to play. It's often thought of as just supplemental funding for projects of interest to different components of our scientific enterprise, academia predominantly, but working with government and with industry as well. Now, I think because of events in the world, people are turning more to philanthropy to perhaps replace some critical funding streams. That's not realistic. But what philanthropy can do, especially at this critical time, I think, is really both to serve as a funder, a convener, and a catalyst for action that works across domains of activity, works across disciplines, sectors, and borders, and helps to think about and implement strategies that can be institutionalized that provide the structural context for the kind of collaboration that's needed. Philanthropy can be far more nimble and agile than some of the other partners in our ecosystem. At least traditionally, it has been outside of the pressures of political cycles, political ideologies, and bureaucratic processes that can slow movement forward in both the public and the private sector and within the academic context. It can create context for bringing people together across sectors that can be very valuable to both prioritize and share knowledge that can enable future collaboration and strengthen an integrated ecosystem for science. And it, I think, importantly, can really help to not just fund activities, but to achieve the kind of alignment needed in terms of priorities, processes, and actions. It is, I think, a really important time for us to be asking this question of how do we build resilient and collaborative science ecosystems. It is essential that we recognize that we have been plagued over many years by the siloization of these different domains of activity. I think philanthropy has demonstrated how it can work to leverage the assets and the roles of the different components of the ecosystem, but can do so in a way that with government can come in and help to identify strategies that can be scaled up, to identify new ways of doing research. For industry, it can help to de-risk areas of research and make it more attractive. In academia, obviously, it can strengthen collaboration across disciplines, across institutions, and help to initiate projects that can work across things like public-private partnerships could be initiated by foundations, things like pre-competitive research initiatives, obviously broad scientific collaborations, large and small. So I think that philanthropy has perhaps a more important role than ever. Funding is a big piece of it, but I think it's really the convening and the catalytic aspects that make it important to have philanthropy at the table.
Thank you. Brilliant. So you've all been impeccably well behaved, and we've got lots of time for discussion. So I'm going to kick off. So firstly, there seems to be one thing that was completely in common to everyone on the panel, which is that you all agreed that the partnerships were rather bespoke, and depending on what you want to do. I mean, I think that was your message, Joachim. So I think that's fine. But there were other areas where I think there was actually almost quite radical disagreement that came out. In other words, there was the idea that the ecosystem, it was for the universities to be pushing innovation into the system. So, Carmen, you talked about lining everyone up to achieve your aims. Now, your aims were very worthy in that you wanted medical advances. Helen, you wanted to broad support for whatever the subject is, and you used philosophy as an example. But then when we heard from Ephraim and from Lukovi, they were giving government perspectives, which was, well, if you want our money from government, then you're going to have to tackle policy relevant issues. And Lukovi in particular said, and this was something where there was probably an opposite view expressed earlier, you needed to be able to measure it. And of course, you were talking about things like the SDGs. And I think the other thing that came out, obviously, is that there is a great deal of inequality. But it leads me to ask, actually, we talk about an ecosystem, but is there actually any such thing as an ecosystem here? What do we mean by ecosystem? Joachim, you shook your head, so I'll go back to you.
There are many ecosystems. That's my point. Let's not try to bring them together. Let's be smart in playing them. And these ecosystems of the science communities increasingly are interdisciplinary. They are more and more transnational. And we need to match these ecosystems also with the funding opportunities. So philanthropy is equally diverse. So if we want to build, I relate quite a bit to philanthropy, was on boards and look for the money and for the good partnerships there. So the matchmaking between science, ecosystems, and suitable partners in philanthropy is something where I think we should share more knowledge about that because newcomers have difficulties to play that. And similarly, with the large growing science system in the private sector, especially in the digital industry, we need to understand that better to come to useful partnerships. And as academies, we must not only look to ministries of science and innovation, but for instance, in health, we have different partners. In agriculture and food, we have different partners. So we need to dissect it to come to a coherent, productive relationship that is worthwhile strengthening.
And a follow-up, the word resilience has been applied, but if we don't have one ecosystem, what does resilience mean in this context?
Well, I hesitate to see science fall down and bounce back. No, I think the science system, the global science system, is as strong as it ever was. If we are punched by entities which undermine our freedom, then we have to stand up rather than get punched down and have to rebuild. So, I mean, resilience is a concept which I rather would avoid in this context. I just want to have a strong and stronger, ever stronger science system doing useful long-term and productive science for humanity.
Thank you. So Helen, let me turn to you. So you live in an ecosystem where much of the money you receive for research is derived from taxpayers' pockets. So who should set the questions and what rights do taxpayers have in all of this?
You mentioned that I come from a system, but I think we all come from a system where much of the money for the research comes from
not if you're an industry, you don't, but
yeah, but yeah. How should we set the boundaries?
No, who should, I mean, who should ask the questions? Who should set the research questions? I mean, we've heard from Ephraim that if you're sitting in Malawi, you want research that's going to help you with essentially Malawian taxpayers.
So I think this connects very nicely with the discussions that are becoming more intense around academic freedom. So from that perspective, it's the idea is that the research questions should come from the researchers themselves. There should be the freedom to determine the path in research by the scientists themselves who are most competent in their fields. And that connects in general with the way in which we build the institutions that are necessary for the resilience of the scientific ecosystem. So for me as a lawyer, I think the institutional background is important as well. So it's important that we view science as one of the pillars in a society. and it requires freedom to do that, to keep the other powers in governance in check. And in order to do that, we need the independence of that part of the society. And so the independence of framing research questions is connected with the ability to act as one of the balancing powers in governance.
So let me ask a follow-up question, although this is going down a rabbit hole, and I don't intend to get deep into the rabbit hole, but is academic freedom an unqualified right?
There are no rights which are unqualified.
So what do you think the qualifications for academic freedom are?
That's well.
Well, let me sort of feed the witness, as it were. Isn't one of the qualifications that you can actually raise the money to do the research you want to do?
This is a conversation to be had. I think it sounds like you would have views to share there, but one of the ways in which academic freedom is regulated is by the scientific community itself. So there are internal rules within the disciplines about what is good science and what is not. And so that's one of the ways in which academic freedom is not an absolute freedom. It is quite strictly regulated by the way in which we understand what's good science and what's not good science. This can be harmful in some environments as well. So some rules about what's good science and what's not may be inhibiting actually new discoveries because the scientific systems may be too conservative about the rules, but the rules are definitely there. So that's one way in which the academic freedom might be in a good way regulated, but also in a harmful way regulated.
Okay, so let me turn to Peggy, and I'm going to hand over to the audience a minute because I don't want to dominate this discussion. So I hope some hands will start going up. Can I just sort of see whether there are potential hands at the moment? Good. Okay, I'll come to you in a minute now. Okay, so Peggy, let me turn to you because what's the role of philanthropies in actually setting questions, do you think? Yeah.
Well, I guess the philanthropy certainly can. I could take it.
I think the microphone's not working, unfortunately. Is it? Maybe we should just use that one microphone and pass it down. Oh, okay.
I think I'm working.
Yeah, you're working.
The light is on. I mean, certainly philanthropy can take a lead in setting the questions, and we've seen that in many instances, and large foundations in particular can really set the direction for an entire field of research or application. But I don't know that that's what we would want as the overall operating system routinely. I think what we really would hope for would be to have a more integrated ecosystem and enterprise that was both mindful of what are the opportunities in science as technology and understanding advances, and we have more insights into what can be done, but have that align with also a responsible assessment of what are unmet needs and critical opportunities. I do think that philanthropy has a luxury in some ways of being able to do this convening across components of the ecosystem, and in that way might be able to lead discussions about some of the critical scientific questions. Government has a special role in doing that as well, I think. But it's a very hard question. It's not one that I think we would want any one component of the ecosystem to be anointed as taking the lead. But I think that philanthropy certainly historically and looking to the future will play a critical role in terms of shining a spotlight on critical needs and research questions. But it will not be able to do so effectively unless it has the input and engagement of government, industry, and academia.
Yeah, I'm just going to bring you in, Sita.
So what we do in the Philippines is this is for health, but there is a the generation of the health research agenda. It's a national unified health research agenda, good for 3 years. But this involves all the players across the country, from universities to the ministries. Now, that's one angle we're in that may be of interest, maybe for the government, for the policymakers. In terms of generation of innovations, it's really done to the university. So what we do is we bring together the basic scientists and the clinicians, and we start with a conversation on what do they need. So I think the generation of questions can happen at many levels. So really the academia can be an opportunity, a location where conversations can happen. So I think right now we have the next 3 years, but it's not limited to that. But at least if you're in the list, you will be given priority in terms of funding from government.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Let me turn briefly to Lukovi on this question. I mean, you're from a development agency, so as a customer in your ecosystem, you're actually looking for specific activity, aren't you?
Oh, yes. What I could say, number one, when it's come to the economic equation, because if we have to focus mainly on research and innovation, we can focus on the Schumpeterian model. You know, firms could produce, but if we leave them on their own, the civil society, the community will call them in a very extremist way as a mafia, especially because they are focusing on the profit, because a firm with that profit should disappear. So you have to at least be competitive in the market through R&D and then embedded into innovation, or you disappear. So for that, the government should provide some regulatory measure to avoid a bias. And at the same time, it's important for our firms to make sure that they learn from tertiary institutions, because they are handling science. But the only danger when science is captured by powerful corporate, then even publications are biased. So then we need to make sure that we secure a very conducive environment to protect the weaker, and to use those instruments in a way that we put everyone together when we have to implement science diplomacy, gender, youth involvement in everything we are handling. Public-private partnership is very important, and also capacitating our own citizens to be aware of what is happening, because some of the products people are even consuming, those are products that should never be consumed. And we are seeing the trend in the USA with some of the products. So I think it's important for us to consider the advocacy approach, and having all the philanthropists willing to create this equilibrium, to be together, and to use the academies we have, at least also to inform accordingly through excellence in research and development, and that should inform also innovation. When it's come to technological innovation, either product where we have service and good, or processes. That's what I can say so far, and that has been our agenda so far in implementing all those new emerging technology we are things, frontier technology, from AI to gene drive, and also not imposing to countries, allowing them to speak if they feel that is comfortable is a priority, without harming the society, to make it very sustainable. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to the audience. You had a question. Please can questioners and speakers identify themselves as well. Thanks.
My name is Raila Basuni. I'm the provost of Saxony Egypt University for Applied Science and Technology. So we are very keen to align with industrial needs. And so my question is actually, you mentioned that there is insufficient quality in innovation for industrial needs. So do you think that it's because of lack of trust in science, or is it lack of communication?
Clearly a question for Ahmed.
Well, I think it is lack of communication, which led to lack of trust. And I think also it's lack of the infrastructure, of the proper funding that is getting into the universities to be able to do world-class innovation. There is beautiful research happening in research-based universities here in Egypt, like my university and Zuhair University and all the research-based universities. However, in most of the private universities here in Egypt, you wouldn't see research at all, or very minimal research. So again, it's relevant to the local lens and the geography. So this is not the case in the more developed countries and the more advanced innovation research-centered universities.
But you're a venture capitalist, so you are looking to support exciting new innovative businesses.
100%, yeah.
So in which case, isn't it in your own catalytic interest to
Yes.
actually build bridges between your world and the world of
Absolutely,
local
absolutely.
institutions?
And specifically, we are trying at Avaros Ventures to do that.
Yeah.
And we are trying to knock doors with universities, talk to them, give them the initiatives. We're also doing some hackathons in the universities, sector-specific or even sub-sector-specific hackathons, so they can even incite their students and inseminate the ideas about what we're trying to build.
So that could be a really good outcome of this meeting, some exchanges of cards. Please, you're next. Can I see some more hands, just so that the microphone needs to go? Okay, so there are two hands right at the back afterwards.
Thank you for this opportunity. First of all, I would like to share another questions during the very fruitful conversation between Dr. Gheda and Dr. Ahmed. I would like to ask about how to sustain the integration between funding agent and academia in terms of financial model and protection of intellectual property. This is the first one. The second one is about the resilience, shelf lifetime of R&D solutions. So most of industry need to be R&D solutions to access to market. So it's so fast. But in the wording of academia, it's so many field required more time. For example, agriculture sectors and the agribusiness solutions. So how we can develop or overcome in terms of strategic action plan, master plan, and so on, to overcome these challenges. Yeah, thank you.
Ahmed, another one for you, I think.
Well, I think there are two wings for this. First, I think we need to incentivize the private sector in order to be able to invest more in research and development. And this will only happen when you have some kind of tax brackets. All of this actually boils down to the fact that there is very country level specific issues when it comes to innovation. So what you're all talking about here is something that is maybe affects us in a way, but there are more pressing issues that we all have. So so this is one part of it. And what was the first part? Sorry.
Hang on, I think until the microphone comes, no one can hear.
How to sustain financial support and IPP protection of
Yes. So that comes again to the translational institutions. So now, in the last 3 to 5 years, perhaps we have seen some of the IP commercialization kind of offices. It's happening at the AUC, it's happening across, and also there is a huge role for ISSF in doing so. And WIPO was here, I think, a couple of years, and there is a movement towards IP commercialization. And again, in our sector, in our country-specific issues, that's something very novel for all of us. So I think it's happening. That will drive VC investments. The more IP coming across, the more VC money that will come, and more LPs will invest in VCs, and we'll come to a virtuous cycle.
But I mean, in a sense, the whole point of protecting intellectual property is so that you can exploit it. So finding those partnerships?
Okay, can I respond?
Yes, come and sit over there.
For mature universities with a lot of inventions, there's usually an office dedicated to that one. Let's say in my university, I have an office. It's called the Technology Transfer and Business Development Office. Number one, they go around all the departments and colleges to see if there are new inventions. They protect actually from the very beginning, and then they look for potential investors and so on. So if your university is not yet mature, then of course you can partner with another system. So I guess as the university matures, there are many offices that must be put in place, all related to research and invention. So that's only one. That's for the IP. Second will be the grants office. The third will be the Office for Research Integrity. So what I've learned is that as the universities mature and with more inventions, then there will be the need for support systems for the researchers.
Good, thank you. At the back.
Thank you.
Not working.
Yes, it is. Hi, Shakila Tangaratinam, Vice President, International Academy of Medical Sciences at UK. Some of the key reasons why we continue to work in silos include understanding each other's priorities, understanding the priorities of the policymakers, the industry, and researchers. Speaking the different languages, we still need to be better in understanding the lingo which each of us talk. And then lastly, how we actually work across different models. Industry operates in a different way, policymakers differently, and researchers at the universities. So we really need to bring together people across these sectors. So for example, from our academy, we've started the cross-sector hubs that we are funding for different regions in UK that specifically focuses on bringing together researchers, academia, industry, and policymakers with a series of planned events. And this is a competitive process by which each region, people in each region or organizations can bid for. And the second way is we also fund specific early career researchers for them to work closely with industry and policymakers. And already we're seeing the fruits of it. We've had people come out of the program who've gone into industry, and one has started working in Whitehall as well. But this is a start, because we are now realizing we can't operate in silos. We do need to have this interaction together. So I would like to hear from the panel some of the examples of what you managed to do in the cross-sector space, and also how we can work across countries. Yes, it is a challenge within nations, but here we are as an inter-academy partnership, how we can actually expand such efforts between countries as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Shakila. I mean, sharing priorities is clearly the key issue. You cannot have a partnership if you don't share priorities, by definition almost. If you'd like to think of examples you'd like to share, let's just have the other question from that table.
Thank you very much. This is actually in follow-up to the previous speaker. I think essentially the stakeholders outlined on the screen there, they really each comes from a different world. The divide between government, academia, industry, and philanthropy has never been bigger. And academies of sciences, unfortunately, have not learned the lesson of COVID, when a few years ago, the whole science advice and science ecosystem failed to deliver as far as governments is concerned. So the proposal that I'd like to get the feedback of the panelists on is that I think we have to establish a common agenda for all stakeholders. Now, that can be, for example, the concept of human security, which was promoted back in the 90s as the umbrella target to which which all stakeholders were trying to achieve. It has a number of subcomponents, of course, where academia can have a role, government, philanthropists, and industrialists as well. Or, for example, more recently, the Global Innovation Landscape, which provides a very comprehensive set of indicators for the various stakeholders to focus on and build collaborative programs based on the global innovation indicator or landscape to really join forces and utilize science for the well-being of humanity more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. But of course, in picking industry, government and philanthropy, you've picked all the sources of money. So academia depends on one of those three pretty much, unless they're like Harvard, you've got a vast endowment. But who would like to tackle that point really, or give any inspiring examples for us? Please, Ephraim. Yep.
Thank you very much. I want to respond to the first issue that was raised by my colleague over there. It was a question of setting priorities. I think it is very possible for the academia, the private sector, philanthropy, and the government policymakers to come together and discuss pertinent issues in terms of what should be prioritized, which strategies are we going to employ if we want to undertake a particular kind of research. It could be research in the health sector. What is very important is that very often you find that the researchers have conducted the research, they have the final output, but the challenge comes in when it comes to dissemination. Do we produce policy briefs that can easily be accessed by the policymakers when they need to use that? If in my case, when there is a particular kind of a bill on the floor, maybe I could be interested to access certain information as quickly as possible. If research findings are not translated by the scientists into policy briefs, then it becomes very difficult to make a decision from an informed point of view. So there should be constant engagements amongst these players so that they can find a common ground in terms of how we want to move ahead. I wanted to raise that point.
Helen wants to respond, I think.
Yes, so I wanted to continue from what you just said. From the perspective, again, of academic freedom. So it's one thing to provide scientific advice to government, and it's definitely a very valuable relationship to build, and that's something that I have been involved in the framework of the scientific advice mechanism at the European Commission. It's definitely something that we need to think about in the places where we are involved. But from the perspective of academic freedom, we don't want research questions to be framed only through the interests of the governance and the needs of governance. We do want the research questions to be open for the scientists themselves to determine, and there has to be, from that perspective, there has to be sufficient freedom and openness in the academic environment to do the research that the scholars themselves consider important. And I think what we see in the world is that there is more and more pressure on sciences to be very practically oriented, to be instrumental to justify their purpose to the taxpayers through the value that they produce in terms of economic output and the achievements that can be quantified. But there is a very strong line of argument for the intrinsic value of sciences as well. So not everything that we do has to be justified by instrumental means, but there's an intrinsic value to sciences in the sense that it's part of a good society to have excellent sciences. It's part of the nature of a good society, flourishing society, to have sciences that are free and that can be up to the scientists themselves to determine. So it's just worth maybe having that on the table as well.
But what's about societies that are not flourishing, that have childhood malnutrition and deaths from infectious diseases?
I'm leaving it to you.
I'll leave that one hanging. There was a question just there. No, okay. There was a question. There was a hand at the back, please.
Can I just comment on the last while the microphone is going? I just want to underscore one thing. It comes back to a question you asked, Mark, very early about, so do we really have an ecosystem? And I think that, one of the challenges we have is really making sure that these different components really understand where they fit within this operating system, and understand that it is an ecosystem, and that actions taken in one affect others, and that I think we have an obligation to work together in order to be able to best harness advances in science and technology for the public good. But that isn't something that is necessarily embodied every day in all of the actions that people are taking. It's not something that is sort of part of the DNA of what is being done. But I think it is, we do have to make sure that we have our priorities aligned and understand that that is kind of the mission of the scientific enterprise at the end of the day. And I think we have an obligation, whichever sector you're in, to learn more about the context of your work. And if I can take off my philanthropy hat and put on a hat that I had now a decade ago as the commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, one thing that was striking to me was that we had a biomedical research and innovation ecosystem, but it didn't work nearly as well as it could have, because everybody viewed themselves as operating in discrete domains. But in fact, how the science was funded, both bench research and clinical studies, issues around IP and other things, the nature of how research was done, and how research findings were passed off to industry or co-developed with industry towards the end goal, and then ultimately, how do you make sure that the products are actually made available and affordable for those in need? And how do you align the gaps, the unmet needs, with what's happening at the very beginning of the system in terms of investments in research and development? And I saw a lot of really high quality academic research from a technical perspective that had no value in advancing that knowledge and discovery for real world products, because they didn't understand anything about the next steps. And I think, that it is really important that we spend more time as a scientific enterprise understanding the different elements of it, so that we can all drive in the same direction.
I mean, that makes complete sense. But would you also agree that researchers often open Pandora's box, and then at the end of the day, once the box is open, we can't control what's done with the technologies that we've unleashed?
Well, that's certainly true. And I think we also have to remember that not all research should be done with a specific goal in mind.
Absolutely.
We need, to.
No, there's no doubt about that. The beauty of the Higgs boson, even though I don't quite understand what it is, but there was a question. It was a question at the back. Yeah.
I want to thank you for the opportunity to make this contribution. My name is James Hawkins Ephraim, presenting the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. And I'm emphasizing arts and sciences because in the Ghana Academy of Arts and Science, our concept now is that science has become social. All the problems that science is going to find solutions to must benefit the society. But how did the Ghana Academy of Arts and Science come into being? We were started in 1959 by the first president of our country, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. And we were set up as a learning association or learning group to advise government on issues ranging from science, arts, politics, social, to government. So that we more or less were a group set up to advise government. Therefore, The Ghana Academy of Arts and Science is sponsored by government. The workers there are paid by the government, but the fellows of the academy are individuals that are identified in the society and are nominated to be qualified to be members of the academy. And most of them are coming from the universities who have active research with their PhD students, master students, and some of the deliberations that we take in the academy are actually passed through our members to be implemented at the various universities. Recently, when COVID came, we had to set up special qualified statisticians to advise government on how to cope with the COVID pandemic that Ghana was facing. And actually, correlate to that, and in terms of that, we also set up as an academy.
I'm going to have to ask you to wind up because we're running out of time.
Yes.
So,
okay, so I'm trying to look at the strengthened partnership across government. We are owned by government. We have a lot of our members who are coming from academia, and recently interacted with industry, cocoa industry, to look at the effects of cocoa with the theobromine in it to help with fighting COVID. And we have started making efforts in the science and technology project, which IAP is supporting us. And we're looking forward to really make science a part of our culture, which we call an acculturation of science in our culture.
thank you very much.
And thank you so much.
Thank you. Right, we're in the last 7 minutes, actually 6 minutes, but I think we can run over by a minute or so. So I'm just going to run down the panel again. I'm going to give Peggy the last word. And just before, I'm going to thank the panel, but come and sit her. Yeah, this is your last minute, as it were.
Well, I truly believe that academia can be the catalyst for collaborative partnerships. And of course, collaborative partnerships will eventually fuel innovation. And then, as we've heard many times today, innovation will eventually promise a brighter future for the next generation. So we need academia to be part of the game.
Thank you. Ephraim.
Thank you very much. I think the academia will always be a main player in the socioeconomic development, more especially when it comes to science. Science is based on facts, objectivity, and the continuous engagement between the customers. In this case, I'm talking about the private sector and the government. They buy into the research findings so that they can produce value to their operations. If we really want to add value, then policies that are developed, they should be based and grounded in evidence coming from the scientists. So the interaction is very good, continuous interaction. Thank you.
Thank you. Helen.
Thank you. There are many things to say, but I think one thing that I'd like to leave based on the comments that I've made so far is that I think we can achieve the greatest transformative potential of academia by keeping it independent. But just keep it in mind when we are building the partnerships that sometimes this independent institutional framework is what we need in order to achieve most.
Thank you. Joachim.
I think in these complex times of a divided world, we need to identify at a global level projects that IAP could pursue. Islands of consensus type projects. Let me give you 2 examples. The future use of the soils of the world. We have a major degradation problem there. Secondly, energy transition. We have the collective knowledge here. So collective action to address collective public goods is one thing. At the national level, I think we need to support government on demand, and we need to also articulate how science policy and policy in general can be improved. For that, we need to have a lot more sharing of knowledge and science around the world, especially between the rich world and the not so rich world.
Thank you. Luc Ovey.
Thank you indeed. What I can say is very important for us to start making sure that we go through a mapping exercise of some of our national policies on science, technology, innovation to find out if there are provisions allowing the networking, partnership among all the stakeholders. At the G20 Research and Innovation Working Group, the issue of also making sure that we have science advisor being around most of our decision makers is very important, because some of those who might not be able to understand the importance of knowledge and innovation are not able to advise accordingly. And also we need to support open science. And that's the reason why with WIPO, we are even piloting an initiative on intangible investment, because some of the economy we are seeing even non-tangible investment are going up to 30% of GDP, where we have innovation, R&D, IP, all those aspects. And finally, as part of the Science Forum we had in South Africa some days ago, the issue of involving journalists in science is very important. And also, I think is also crucial on a continent where we have more than 60% represented by the youth, to make sure that we energize Africa in involving the youth, and then focusing mainly on excellence of science in involving National Academy of Sciences and also the African Academy of Sciences and all other related entities that could support us facilitate the interconnection, because we already have a continental strategy and we have SDG number 17 and 9 for us to make everything possible. Thank you very much indeed for giving us this space. Yeah.
Ahmed.
Pleasure.
Well, academia is and will remain the cornerstone of innovation. And without innovation, there will be no venture capital industry. Yet we need to have some kind of market-specific approaches to each and every country and region that factors in the economic and the social structure of each market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before I hand over to Peggy, because I really am giving you the last word in this session, I just want, first of all, to thank the panel. You've been terrific. You've really engaged. You've kept wonderfully to time. So we've had a lot of time for discussion. Most of all, I want to thank the audience, because you've been an engaged audience, and I suspect we could have kept the conversation active for quite a long time. It's really important topic, and unpacking it's very, very complicated. There isn't one ecosystem, and the title does have ecosystems. And it's been clear that you have to have the appropriate geometry. You do have to share the question. And if you don't share the question, there is a problem in many cases. And I entirely accept the point about academic freedom, but it isn't an unconstrained freedom. That's the point. So over to you, Peggy. No.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to have the last word, and for it, I will take off my philanthropy hat again on this panel and put on my IAP hat. This is the last session of our scientific conference, and I think we appropriately are ending it on a very profound and important question that really goes to the heart of what IAP, I think, is about, and what we hope to be able to pursue going forward. You know, we really are living in very complex and challenging times. I think that the landscape for science and our science ecosystem is in a period of enormous transformation due to advances in science and technology, due to global crises, due to you know, a really complex set of societal challenges, economic constraints, and a very difficult geopolitical context for much of our work. Yet we all know that science underlies almost every aspect of our daily lives, and the application of scientific knowledge is going to be essential to solving the problems of today, tomorrow, and our shared future for the human species and for the rest of the globe, so, and the health of our planet. So I think we can all agree that we have a shared mission that is incredibly important and powerful, but there's a lot of work to be done. So we are so grateful to all of you for participating in this scientific conference, which tried to touch on a lot of critical issues for the scientific community and well beyond. And many of you will be staying tomorrow for our General Assembly, where we'll be able to talk in more depth about specific activities of what IAP is doing and really helping to define the blueprint for action in the years to come. But I really do think that, you know, one of the great strengths of the IAP is that it offers a forum to be able to bring people together across government, academia, industry, and philanthropy. It offers a forum to work together to better define what are the most pressing problems before us and how can we apply the best possible science to be able to work both globally and create a vision, but also act locally. So thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel and to have the last word, so to speak. And thank you everyone for participating and, importantly, for your ongoing contributions to the work of IAP and to the work of our scientific ecosystem.